Hi, my name is Michael Waits. Thank you for joining us for this very special edition of Insurance for the New Possible. We are broadcasting live from the Chubb Insurance booth at the Singapore Fintech Festival, the largest fintech festival in the world and a knowledge platform for the global fintech community. We could not be more excited to be here. Now let's welcome Sarita Singh, Regional Head and Managing Director of Southeast Asia, India, and Greater China from Stripe, with whom we will discuss the key to building a Phygital experience. We're on and we're live. We're back at the Singapore Fintech Festival. I'm not sure who's having more fun, the crew or us. Anyway, it's great to have you here, Sarita. I really, really appreciate it. Where are you from originally? Just for me.
Born and raised in Australia.
Where in Australia?
In Melbourne.
Melbourne, nice. I've never been there. I've been to Australia for only a couple of days, actually. And I'll tell you why I think that's weird in a second. But how long have you been living outside of Australia now?
Just over 20 years.
Just over 20 years. When you left, did you think you were going to be gone for this long?
Oh, no. I was like, Mum and Dad, I'll be back in a couple of years. Don't worry. And then somewhere along the way, I've picked up a mortgage and a husband and children and dogs.
And I don't know where any of them came from. But I want to share this with you for a really important reason. When I went to Morgan Stanley in Tokyo in 1990, I didn't expect to be there for 22 years.
Wow.
And I didn't expect to never live in the United States again. I've not lived in the US for 33 years. But I do think it's really important to live a life in the way that you have, because I think it gives us a really different perspective, particularly when it comes to dealing with customers and also doing innovation. Because once you start looking at the world in a way that's different, then you start looking at everything in a way that's different. And I think that that guides you into, a different thought process through everything that you do. Is that fair?
I think that's definitely a fair statement. It also gives you a perspective on how things can come together, because as different as we are, there are actually many more similarities.
But that's the point though, right? You may not know that. And when you first start, you get to Chicago and you think, these people are insane. And then you realize, actually, you know what? And when you drop it down to the bottom of the funnel, they're trying to eat, they're trying to protect their families, and we're actually not that different.
Yeah.
That's what I meant, yeah?
And I think when you've had exposure to so many different places and cultures and lived in a variety of cities around the world, you spend more time looking for the similarities than you do for the differences.
Exactly. That's the point though, right? So when you first go, you're looking like, that's different. They don't eat that way. Why are they using chopsticks? And when you've done what you've done and what I've done, you start saying, that's exactly what we do in a different way. And I just want to get back to the innovation thing too, because I think that's also the key to innovating in different regions and different locales, because you can say they're doing the same thing, but they're approaching it from a different way, which means when we serve it to them, we have to do the same thing. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about payments per se, but talk to me initially about how payments are an enabler.
Ultimately, payments is an enabler for businesses to do what they need to do best.
Right.
If Stripe is doing our job well, the financial infrastructure that we have means that we are enabling businesses to focus on what they need to do. We abstract away that complexity.
I love the word abstract. Sorry, go ahead.
So what we do is provide that digital financial infrastructure so the businesses can do what they do best, so that they can serve their customers in ways that are meaningful. But ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to help businesses that we serve to find new customers, to improve their customer experience, find new channels to market, and ultimately new revenue streams. So the point is to not only abstract the complexity away, but for the purpose of growing their business.
Okay, this is what I want to talk about. And if businesses should be solving problems, right, and fixing pain points, and I want to look at it through the lens we discussed at the beginning, right? Every company needs to have stuff paid for, right? And they all need to sell things. But maybe the way they're approaching sales and the way they're approaching payments is different, right? So maybe you can share some customer stories with me about how that actually is different and what that leads to.
Oh, that's really interesting.
But you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do see what you mean. What I believe is that the customer experience is really a result of your payments experience. You can have, as a merchant, the best products and services in the world. But if there is too much friction in the process of engaging with you, even the best products and services in the world will not get me coming back to you.
Yeah, it's not worth me waiting 15 minutes for a pizza that I can get in 7 minutes. I use pizza as an example a lot of the time because everybody kind of knows it.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, not at all. So we know that if the process of a checkout, for example, on an e-com website takes too long,
right,
only 10% of customers are converting. So if you think about what the implications of that are,
right,
businesses are spending all this time and resource on optimizing their apps or optimizing their websites so that they can capture revenue and clients, etc. But if your checkout experience is really poor,
right,
you're going to see a massive drop off. So understanding that your payments experience is in fact the same thing as your customer experience,
right,
is really key for businesses so that they can grow.
So this is a really important point for me. The payment experience is your customer experience.
Yes.
And let me give you an example and you tell me where I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. I go into a store, I want to buy something. I try it on or I eat it or whatever it is, and I've loved every second of it, right? And then I go to pay for it. And it's just terribly hard. I'm not going back.
Never.
Right? As a customer, I always say, like, why is it so hard for me to give you my money?
Correct.
Why are you in my way?
Yeah. We say that? We say that regularly in our day-to-day lives.
Do you?
And so I find that even myself, if I'm experiencing that kind of a situation,
right.
The first thing I'll do the next day is call up and say, I'd like to give you some feedback as a customer of yours, because I really want to make it better, not just for people like me, but for all customers who are contributing to that particular organization.
So I hadn't thought about this before we sat down. I want to share another thing with you. I used to go running in Tokyo when I was working in the stock market, and every company has a stock code. So I forget, like Sony 6758, Toyota 7203. I can still remember some of them. And when we used to run through, we couldn't separate the company from the code. So what do I want to ask you about? You're in the business of making that payment process frictionless and seamless. It should be simple. It should just be as easy as me just like sliding something over. Done. No hassle, no nothing, right? But in your day-to-day life, you're constantly buying things. How hard is it for you to separate, like, I can fix that in this case? Or they must be using this because that's amazing. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. You can't unknow what you know.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right?
that's the point I'm trying to make.
So I find that I am assessing all of my interactions with businesses.
Right.
And who I actually interact with is very much more dependent now on what that transaction experience is, what that payments experience is.
Right.
So it isn't just the quality of the product or the quality of the follow-up later. If you just make it hard for me and it's frictionful, right, I'm unlikely to do business with you again. And I think as consumers, we are getting more and more demanding, and especially in Southeast Asia.
Tell me.
I'm seeing that consumers are getting much, much more savvy, right? Technology is at the heart of everything that we do.
It is.
And so our expectations are continuing to rise.
Right.
So the onus of the responsibility is on businesses to drive a level of not only frictionless experience, but a personalized experience.
Talk to me. What do you mean by a personalized experience?
How you want to interact with a business might be very different to me. So let's go back to your pizza example.
Please.
Right? You might want to just go into an app, right? And the pizza company has an app. You order your pizza, you're off.
Right.
But I might want to interact on a website.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're starting to think about the complexity that organizations are facing.
Absolutely.
They have to offer multiple channels to find different kinds of customers and interact in the way that we want to interact with technology. So that's the first challenge.
Go for it.
The second thing is how you pay for something might be very different to how I pay for things. So you strike me as a wallet kind of a guy. Right?
I don't own a wallet, but go ahead. But thank you very much for that.
Digital wallet.
Go ahead.
So maybe Apple Pay or Link by Stripe, or any of these one-click type of.
Super easy for me to pay.
There's wallets. There's one-click payment options. You strike me as that kind of a guy.
I just want to get it easy. Done. I paid for it. Right. I've already enjoyed the thing. I don't want to have any other hassles.
Brilliant. I'm a pay now kind of a girl.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I like to use pay now. And so now if you think about it, if you're the owner of that pizza shop, not only do you have to offer multiple channels to interact to order the pizza, now you're going to have to offer multiple payment methods as well. Right. And so that starts to become very complicated.
It does.
And you want your interactions to be the same, whether you are going through an app, going through ordering on a messaging platform, whether you are ordering through a website.
Right.
You want your experience to more or less be the same.
It's the same, exactly. So this is what I was going to bring up. Please go ahead, because I want to follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is what we call unified commerce. How do we take a customer experience, and irrespective of the channels that you're using,
right,
you will have a very similar experience of how that merchant works with you. And part of this is not just about serving customers like you. Part of it is also about brand. Merchants need to think about their brand experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So your experience across all of these different channels with the various payment methods is really important to how an organization shows up.
So you're talking whether it's omnichannel distribution or omnichannel payments.
Correct.
You're trying to control the same experience, right?
Exactly.
I want to dig even deeper into this.
Please.
We spent a lot of time today already talking about this combination of an offline experience, so a physical experience, and a digital experience. And there's been a lot of talk over the last 5 years about digital transformation. Companies need to do this in a digital form. And we spent a lot of time saying it's not just a PDF. We don't have to go there. But if you want the experience to be the same, sometimes I need to run over to the store and pick it up. Sometimes I need to order it online.
Correct.
This idea of a phygital experience is actually really important to me.
Yes.
But also, I want it to feel the same. So if I'm dealing with brand A online, boom, 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 it's easy. And if I go to their store, I don't want to feel like, why aren't you the same as this? What do you think about that?
I think that is exactly the way that consumers, especially demanding consumers like we are here in Southeast Asia,
right,
that is exactly the experience that we are aiming for. And when I think about some incredible brands that we work for, Castlery is a great example where your online experience with them is mirrored with their in-store experience. They're very particular about their customer experience and their brand and the consistency of that. And what's fantastic is that I can do my research for a sofa, for example, online, and then when I go into store, they will be able to track me through this phygital approach, this unified commerce, because they know that I'm searching and I've done transactions with them online before,
right? Yes.
And then I can come into store. Look, because I'm not going to buy a sofa online. I'm going to buy a lamp and maybe some cushions and things online.
Sure.
But by the time I need that sofa, I need to go into store.
But you also want them to know when you get there,
correct,
I'm already important.
Correct.
I've already given you all of these sales.
Yes.
Yeah?
And they know that because the minute I start interacting with them in store, with the terminal devices that they have.
Does something pop up?
Yes, so they know that I've searched, they know what I've actually looked for and how I've purchased from them in the past, and they can make recommendations about the sofa that I want.
That is amazing.
It's a beautiful experience, and I think they are a great example of where a business is marrying their financial experience with their in-store and their online experience.
I'm really curious about this, and I'm sure you can't really generalize, but do you think, and I'm just going to use a company, I don't know if you work with them, but a company like Warby Parker, right, that started online and then built a flagship store downtown in Soho.
Yes.
Do you think it's easier for them to control the sameness of their experience if they start online and then go to offline, or vice versa?
Well, that's a really good question.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's challenging either way, whether you are offline to online, online to offline. The challenge with unified commerce is just that, the unification.
Yeah, it's hard.
And so I think your starting point doesn't really matter, but being very deliberate and thoughtful about what that experience is. And ultimately, it comes back to understanding the customer journey,
right?
And being able to match your interventions and activities along that customer journey.
You mentioned Southeast Asia earlier, so I just want to dig a little bit deeper there. What are some of the unique challenges of operating here? I mean, it's so complex anyway to begin with, online to offline, all these sort of comprehensive and unified commerce. What are some of the things that are unique to Southeast Asia?
So here's an interesting stat for you.
Tell me.
More than 60% of Southeast Asia's cross-border business, right, is done within ASEAN.
Really?
Yes. I mean, that's ultimately...
So like Thailand to Vietnam, Vietnam to Singapore, Singapore to Malaysia, whatever it is.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you think about it, that's why ASEAN was set up as a political and trading bloc.
Yes.
And so a very large proportion of cross-border business is done within ASEAN.
Interesting.
And whilst that is changing,
right,
we don't see that changing dramatically with any material view in the next few years. So that's a great situation for ASEAN.
Right.
But it lends itself
for a lot
to
of different reasons, but
but it lends itself to some challenges. The first is just there's so much fragmentation in this part of the world. Right? And fragmentation, especially in the payments and financial infrastructure world, because payments and financial infrastructure at the end of the day are highly regulated.
Yes.
And so your experience in Singapore will be different to your experience in Indonesia, will be different to your experience in Malaysia. So fragmentation is a real challenge. And so if you think about the translation of that, if you're a business like Carousel, and you've got a brand and you're trying to drive an incredible customer experience, and you've got to function across all of these different countries, how can you go about localizing and personalizing your experience whilst maintaining your brand and managing the complexity and cost for your organization? This is very, very complicated to do.
But such a cool problem to solve.
Such a cool problem to solve. Absolutely. And so this fragmentation lends itself to ways that companies can reduce that complexity. And so we work with a lot of companies around their go-to-market plans and how they intend on serving the segments in the respective locations that they want to be.
What happens when Pay Now gets integrated with Prompt Pay in Thailand, which then gets integrated into UPI in India? What changes?
Everything changes.
Tell me why, though.
Well, we see these things happening in this part of the world that are moving much, much faster than many other places.
Right.
And so this proliferation of real-time payments, I mean, you just mentioned a few.
Right.
Yes, they are connecting to one another, and we know that they're...
But that's new, though. Sorry, go ahead.
It's new.
Super new.
It is very, very new.
Right.
And it's something that we need to think about how we can participate in, but how we can help to advise and provide insights and inputs into customer behaviors. Because if you think about it, the integration itself between all of these payment methods in itself is not the end goal.
No.
What we're trying to solve for is a journey for users, people that are going to be using these services in order to do cross-border business.
Which is why I brought it up, right? Because when I leave Thailand and I've just scanned a QR code to pay for something, when I come to Singapore, if those two things aren't integrated with each other, if there's no methodical way for me to do that easily, I wonder why, right? And again, that changes the level of experience. I want to switch gears a little bit.
Please.
And talk about just like some of the uniqueness of the commerce in Southeast Asia as well. So what are some of those unique things?
So we're seeing three key trends happening.
Okay.
The first is the move away from traditional e-commerce to more marketplaces.
Okay.
Right? So think about the big marketplaces that we interact with here. It could be Shopee or a Lazada, etc.
Right.
And the business model that underpins a marketplace is very different to an e-com. So because it's about suppliers and an ecosystem that is developing around a marketplace.
Right, it's very different than like a one-on-one sales.
Very, very different. Right? So that's one thing that we see definitely moving, marketplaces. And we spend a lot of time with marketplaces all across the world, helping them with their business models and helping them scale globally. Right?
Yeah, because it's impossible for them to understand. Again, this gets back to this abstraction word you used. We want to abstract that piece out for you so you can worry about selling and supplying and don't have to worry about transacting.
Exactly.
Right?
And then the next trend we're seeing is really around subscriptions. So this is a relatively recent behavior that we're seeing.
Is that hard to do from a payment perspective?
Nobody needs to worry about how hard it is to do.
I'm just curious, but go ahead, sorry.
Yes, from a technology point of view.
It's challenging.
It is challenging.
Sorry, go ahead.
But for businesses who want to adopt a subscription-based model,
it should be simple for them to do.
It is simple. It is really simple. And this is exactly what we do with organizations. Because if you think about it, what is a subscription-based model? It is about driving predictability of cash flow.
Absolutely.
And that is what businesses really care about.
I subscribe to a bunch of different things, and every month they just tell me, you've paid for that. But one time what happened to me was I had this thing that I was paying for that was critical to me, and it fell down. And I'm like, this is not my fault. I don't want to think about this at all.
Exactly.
I just wanted it to work.
You want it to work.
Yeah.
You also want to pay as you go somewhat.
Sometimes, yeah.
Right? You may not want to pay hundreds of dollars all at once.
Nope.
But you're happy to pay $20 a month.
No problem.
Right?
Same.
So there's that user behavior or that consumer behavior that merchants need to think about how they can service. So subscriptions, definitely. The other thing about subscriptions is not only is about predictability of revenue, it's also about loyalty.
Right.
Because if you are signing up and then paying every month, you are unlikely to go ahead and cancel every 3 months.
And just go somewhere else to get a similar or the same product.
Correct. And especially if it's at a price point where you're like, it doesn't really justify my time and effort to do anything about it. I'm fine to continue on with it.
Right. I mean, big online companies like Netflix do this all the time.
Exactly.
Talk to me about social commerce. Why is it out here?
Yes.
Why is it so different? Why did it start?
Yes. So think about our own behavior, right? So on one side, many of us use, the big e-com players where there's a linear approach. You see a product, you click on it, you add it to your cart, you follow a linear process, you check out, and then your goods arrive, right? That's a very standard e-com.
Well understood process.
But the way that we like to buy, our buyer behavior in Southeast Asia, across most of Southeast Asia, is this market concept, right? We like to go in, we like to ask questions, we want to potentially even negotiate and haggle.
I was going to say bargain, right?
We don't need a linear, clean process all the time.
No, I don't want it most of the time, but anyway, go ahead.
And so we want to be able to have a relationship, not with a cart, but with somebody that we know is at the other end.
Right, in the same way, if I go shopping with you, you're also verifying the fact that I like this thing.
Correct.
Right? So I'm like, should I get this? Definitely.
Yes.
You may have introduced it to me.
So social commerce, one is about that recommendation element of it. The other is about risk mitigation, right? So
right.
There's still a relatively low level of trust for e-com in this part of the world.
Right.
And so what social commerce allows us to do is actually have a conversation with a human or maybe with a chatbot, but essentially there's still someone behind it. And we feel that raises the trust level in order for us to do a type of commerce. And so we've been partnering with WhatsApp, for example, to pilot social commerce here in Singapore.
How does that work?
So, for example, you might be a restaurant that does ordering.
Right.
So how do you order? You will have some kind of menu or cataloging system from a restaurant that is built on WhatsApp. And so you will order through WhatsApp. You might ask a couple of questions like, hey, is your hummus super garlicky, moderately garlicky, or not garlicky at all? Or do you add coriander to your hummus? You want to ask a bunch of questions to the restaurant owner.
I feel like you've been out to dinner with me, but go ahead. I'm kidding. Go
Strike
ahead.
me as a coriander guy. I don't know if we can be friends, but anyway. So we want to think about that relationship that we have with that restaurant. And if that restaurant is able to answer my questions, I can qualify my needs and personalize it much more. But what has traditionally happened is once I wanted to buy that coriander hummus, I would have to go off the platform, make some kind of payment, then come back onto the platform.
Which is a really bad experience.
Correct.
Really bad experience.
There's a couple of things. One, it's super frictionful.
But also, like, why am I here? I didn't want to go there. I wanted to stay here.
Correct.
Sorry.
So you are highly likely to abandon that purchase. The other thing is, rightly so, we're much more concerned about scams and fraud.
I was just going to say, trust is the first thing that comes to mind. When I get sent somewhere else, I'm thinking, should I really input that thing they're asking me to input there? That code on that CVC code? I'm not doing that. Whatever it is, right? Sorry.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't trust it.
Higher trust in social commerce as well. And so you want to be able to do that entire end-to-end transaction for that hummus on the platform.
Yeah, without leaving. I don't care what happens on the back end, actually, at all. And this gets back to this idea we were talking about at the beginning. I don't want to talk about payments.
Exactly.
I want to talk about doing business.
Exactly right. And that restaurant owner doesn't really care about the underlying financial infrastructure.
Zero.
They just need it to work.
Right.
And that is what we do. And in this particular case, with WhatsApp.
That is the perfect way to end. I really want to thank you for doing this. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I could have gone on for much longer.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you. Don't forget to follow Insurance for the New Possible on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube to stay up to date on all of our amazing and informative content.